Hi friends, welcome back to our little off-grid home. Today we're giving you a peek into how we stock our pantry and get ready for winter. Pantry and food has actually been one of our biggest challenges here off-grid, and so as the weather cools down and the days get shorter, obviously having a well-prepared pantry is one of the ways we can make sure that our family is fed and warm and ready for whatever winter is going to throw our way. Today I'm going to be walking you through what we put together for this winter season. I'm going to show you what our pantry looks like, both the one in the house and the root cellar. I'm going to show you how we make foods with our pantry goods and some other ways that we store food, as well as share with you some of the places we get our food at. So let's just dive in. Stocking an off-grid pantry has been completely different than it was in a typical home. The biggest reason being that we just do not have the space to be able to have a lot of fresh goods or frozen goods or even refrigerated goods. And up until a month or two ago, we barely had space for refrigerated goods. So I'm going to show you kind of how we are doing that and how we've overcome those challenges here. The other big challenge that we've had is we just don't have access to grocery stores or things where we could just run and get something if we need it. Everything that we need to have for meals needs to be at our home because it's a good day-long excursion to be able to go and get food from a store, and the stores that we do have that are semi close by are very expensive, so usually most of the products there don't fit within our budget. So I'm going to show you kind of where we've gotten some things from and how we store them here. One of the things that I'm not able to buy from the grocery store is fresh baked goods, so breads, buns, that kind of thing. So in this video you're going to see a lot of me making a lot of baked goods because that's just something that we have had to do. Occasionally I will get a loaf of bread or something from the store if we are in town and I know I'm going to be able to use it that week, but I don't have freezer space to be able to store extra, so that's just something that I can't stock up on. But it's no big deal. My family loves fresh baked goods, especially buns for our burgers and bread like I'm making here. So it's a little bit extra work, but it's just something that we've had to learn to live with. To help cut back on some of the time it takes to make some of these things so I'm not having to bake fresh every day, I do have a little bit of extra freezer space in the chest freezer that we have in our mudroom. So usually when I make something, I'm going to make a double batch. So here I'm actually making 2 loaves of bread so that we can put one away and eat one right away. Our most challenging foods we've had to source are eggs, lettuce, and fresh herbs, and that's because they all are very expensive here and they all go bad very quickly. We've been able to combat this with growing our own lettuce and herbs and getting some ducks to have here to lay some eggs for us. All right, I'm going to take a short break from the baking and show you my kitchen pantry. So this is the pantry that we built right next to the kitchen, and this has a large portion of our stored foods. Now in here you're going to notice that there is some bulk foods, there's some packaged goods, there's just kind of a huge variety of stuff. We do have a lot of packaged things left over from last winter. We did not spend last winter at our off-grid cabin because I was pregnant and had a high-risk pregnancy, so we had to live in our camper in the city and close to medical services. So there's a lot of things still left over from that, but we'll use them up. It's nice to have some quick and easy things. We've got some big buckets in here where we store large amount of bulk things like oats and sugar and flour. I've got lots of canned goods in here from the store. I knew that with the new baby, I wasn't going to be able to can everything that our family needed. So I've been watching a lot of sales, especially at Target and Vitacost and Azure, to be able to stock up on things like canned coconut milk, canned carrots, and some things that we use on a regular basis. Here's just a short glimpse of our mudroom, and we have a full-size fridge and a nice chest freezer in there. Those have been great. We just got them about a month ago. I've been working on putting our bulk goods into these glass jars, which I've been buying from Azure, which I'll talk about in a little bit. This shelf actually happens to be a lot of our snacks, dried fruit, and nuts, things that are good and healthy for our family and easy to keep shelf stable. It's a great little shelf for the kids to grab off of. And don't worry, we're in the process of putting some bars across the front so the baby can't pull anything off when he starts to get mobile. Here's just a really quick glimpse of an order from Azure. I had a really small order this time, but Azure is one of the places that we get a lot of our bulk goods, especially our dry goods. I will leave a link in the description where you can check them out and some of my guides to buying food from Azure, but this time I ended up with a lot of produce, which was great. Some of it actually was not in the best shape, but I got a refund for that, and the rest we're going to be canning up and adding to our pantry. So here I'm just refilling some of those glass jars that I showed you just a little bit ago. I've found it's the easiest way for me to store some of these dry bulk goods because I can easily see what's inside of them. In one of the towns by us, we have an Amish bulk food store. So when we're in town, we check it out when we can and buy what we can. They just recently got the 50-pound bags of dry goods, and so that's been a great help to us as well. Now I'm going to take you out to our root cellar and show you what we have stored out there. We were amazed to find a root cellar on this property, and we're going to do a full video on it later and how we rebuilt it. But for now, I'm just going to show you what I'm storing inside of our root cellar. So this is where we're using to store most of our home canned goods. It stays a really nice temperature in there as far as we can tell so far. And we're also storing some fresh bulk produce that we have. It works way better than the refrigerator. So far this year, I was able to can up about 300 jars of homegrown produce, so that will really help with our food this winter. All right, I'm going to show you a recipe that our family really loves, and I will link the recipe for this pizza dough in the description. But today I'm making some calzones, and like I mentioned before, I'm going to make a big batch of these so we can eat half of it for lunch, and then the other half can go in the freezer for another quick meal when we need it. That way I can just work once and reap the benefits twice. So our family really loves these. They're really easy, and I can put them together with what I have. We usually serve them with a marinara sauce for dipping, and then a side of some kind of veggies or fruit to kind of round out the meal. But all you have to do is make the pizza dough, and the great thing about this pizza dough is it doesn't have to sit very long before you use it. So you just make it, let it rest for about a half an hour, and then you can start forming it into your calzones. To fill these calzones, I'm just using some turkey sausage that I had gotten on our last trip to town and was storing in the freezer. And I just add a little bit of pizza seasonings into this turkey sausage to make it a little bit more calzone, if that's a word. Just a bit of oregano, basil, and some onion. It doesn't really need a lot because it has some seasonings in it, but that just kind of gives it that pizza flavor. Once the meat's done, I drain it off and let it cool just a little bit, and then roll out some pieces of the pizza dough that I made, add some of the meat into it, add a little bit of mozzarella cheese, which I had frozen, and then I add a little bit of Parmesan cheese. Now I'm going to talk about this Parmesan cheese before you come after me. So yes, it is the shelf-stable cheese, and it is not the nice fresh grated Parmesan cheese. But the reason for that is because we just simply don't have the room for tons of fresh stuff all the time. And so the shelf-stable Parmesan is one of the compromises that I had to make to be able to have more variety of foods here at our off-grid cabin. There's been a few things like that I had to make some changes, and it's just one of those things that we've accepted, and we're good as long as we can have a little bit extra flavor. So the particular pizza dough recipe that I've linked, I usually make a double batch of this, and it makes 8 really big calzones. You could make smaller ones if you want to, but we just make the big ones because it's easy, and I cut them in half, but usually the kids will eat 1 large calzone for a meal anyway, so this works out for us. So total, this will make 8 big calzones for us, and I'll put 4 of them in the freezer, and we'll keep 4 out, and that seems to be enough for a meal. I do a quick egg wash on these before baking, and it gives them this beautiful golden color when they come out of the oven. One of my other challenges with baking off-grid and having an off-grid pantry is to make sure that I'm feeding my very hungry growing kids. I have 1 teenage boy and 1 almost teenage boy, and they eat a lot of food. So I've kind of developed a system of where I make sure that we've got some carbs and good protein for each meal, as well as our fruits and veggies, to make sure that everybody gets full at every meal. And also that's why I have plenty of snacks on hand as well, like I showed you before in those glass jars. All right, we're gonna finish these up and stick them in the oven. You're gonna see my oven a lot in these videos, and we can definitely do a future video on our off-grid appliances here and how they work for us. All right, I mentioned briefly before that eggs have been a huge challenge for us. So before, the challenge was that we just didn't have the fridge space to be able to keep them. So I would get unwashed eggs from my mom, and we would just store them on the counter. You can store them on the counter for up to 3 weeks if they're clean and unwashed. Now we actually have fridge space, so it's been great to be able to store more eggs, and I'm so excited that we have ducks because we now can get some fresh eggs and don't have to wait every couple weeks to be able to get eggs here because our kids eat a lot of them. I'm going to make some zucchini cookies, and this is another great way to just sneak some veggies in food that you're giving your kids. I have one child that absolutely hates zucchini, but he will just devour these cookies. So I got some zucchini the last time we were able to visit my parents, and I'm just gonna make these zucchini cookies. The great part is most of the ingredients in these cookies are stuff that I store or is shelf stable, and I just had to add the zucchini. But the other stuff, like these chocolate chips here, are things that we buy in bulk and just have on hand anyway. So that makes it really easy for me to make treats and meals that use those bulk goods and those shelf stable goods that we have in our pantry. I will link this yummy recipe in the description as well. This recipe is actually one that my granny used to make when I was growing up, but she's actually had made it for decades and decades as she was raising her kids on a farm. All right, now I'm going to jump back to finishing that bread that I started this morning. I made a plain loaf of bread to have for things like sandwiches or grilled cheese, and then this loaf is going to be a cinnamon swirl loaf. This is actually a new recipe, or just slightly modified from the recipe that I've been making for a long time, and my family really loved it. So I'm going to type that out for you in the description so that you can make it too. But really, it's just a basic bread recipe, and then I took some brown sugar and cinnamon and sprinkled it in the middle, rolled it up and baked it just like I would any loaf of bread. And we had that for breakfast, which I'll show you here in just a little bit, and it was so good. One more brief note here, spices are something I also get in bulk. They add huge flavor to otherwise sometimes bland pantry foods. So that's something I always keep on hand, is large amounts of bulk spices and herbs. Okay, one last thing I forgot is that this day I made a batch of buns as well. I had a little bit of mozzarella cheese left from making those calzones, and so I decided to add that and some garlic salt. And I just made some buns, and that night we had hamburgers for supper with these cheesy garlic buns, and they were so super good. The other thing that I wanted to note is kind of in the background here, you can see my little countertop hydroponics garden. That's a little arrow garden. I actually have 2 of them, and that is what we are using to grow lettuce and to grow herbs in the house. I did try to grow stuff outside, but unfortunately the neighbors' cows got into our land and ate the entire garden that I had growing. So now I just have them growing inside, which is okay because we'll be able to grow them year round and not have to worry about any creatures getting into them. These particular little arrow gardens that I got, I bought on the, I think, Black Friday sale, so they were really cheap and they use a really low amount of electricity, so I don't have to feel guilty about growing some fresh stuff right here in my kitchen. So I've already mentioned buying food from Azure and from the Amish store, and the other place that we get our food from is just Sam's Club or Costco whenever we're able to go into a big town, which is about once a month or a little bit less than that. So we usually have a pretty big stock up trip at that time. But as you can see, I am growing some healthy, chunky little kids that need the energy to work off grid and to be able to keep growing. So what we buy and what we store here is really important to us. Now I've kind of got some different formulas that I use for each meal so that I make sure that our family is getting enough nutrition. But since I'm showing breakfast here, I will just share that breakfast is usually some kind of carb like this yummy cinnamon bread, and then I'll pair that with a protein, whether that be eggs, turkey bacon, or something like that. And then we usually have some kind of fruit that goes along with that. So we try to balance out the meals. Nothing is perfect, but I like to have a good variety whenever I'm able to, even if that means using canned goods. Thanks so much for coming along with us this week and seeing how we live in our off-grid home as a family of 6. I hope that you will like this video and subscribe so that you can see any future videos that we put out. And I hope this gives you some ideas. Maybe you're not off-grid, but just to give you some ideas of how to stock a pantry well and how to feed your family well, even if you don't always have access to grocery stores or easy, convenient things. We will see you guys next week.